Welcome to Slapbass Basics. In this video I would like to show the, in my opinion, most common way of slapping and popping the bass. There are a lot of different ways of slapping and popping the bass, and the style I would like to show you in this video is used by guys like Larry Graham and Marcus Miller, of course. Some players like to hammer on the string with their entire underarm, but most players try to hit the string by a movement of their underarm and the hand, the wrist. Take something like, for example, a drumstick and put it in your hand, pretty much in the middle, with your thumb pointing somewhat upwards. And then just try to turn your underarm and your stiff wrist and your fingers. This should give you a pretty good feeling for what actually happens when you try to slap. The next thing is, usually when players start slapping the bass, they kind of get this underarm wrist thing happening, but for some reason they just don't get a good tone out of the bass. Maybe something like this. And of course the reason for that is that you need some speed. When drummers play their drums, they talk a lot about rebounds or bouncing the strings on the drum heads. And basically what happens with your thumb is pretty much the same as like on a drum head. You try to keep your underarm and your wrist really loose, and then try to bounce your thumb off the string right after you hit it. It looks really simple, but for most players it takes a while to get this going. So try to hit the string with this underarm, turning, and then try to bounce your thumb off the string right after you hit it in a really loose fashion. Okay, now that you know how to strike or hit the string with your thumb, the question is, where exactly do you place your thumb or your hand to get the best possible tone? Because it's not that easy. And a good rule of thumb is to put your hand right after the last fret. On most basses you have a little piece of wood at the end of the fretboard right behind the last fret, and that's a pretty good point to aim for with your thumb. If I move my thumb over the fretboard, you'll notice that the sound gets really thin. If I move it away from the fretboard closer to the pickups, then the sound usually gets pretty boomy and indifferent. So you might want to call this end of the fretboard the sweet spot for your slapping, and this also gives you a really good position for the popping of the string, which is usually done with either your index or your middle finger. When you're popping the string, same thing goes for popping. Try to be really loose and do it in a smooth manner. This will usually give you a better sound than just cramping up your hand. And will also be much easier on the calluses of your fingers. Let's do a really easy exercise. Just try to hit your low E string. And then put your first finger on the D string on the second fret, which will give you the octave of the E. So you have two notes that really work well together, the low E and the octave of the low E. And now try to slap your low E and try to pop the octave E. Of course, you can make up your own patterns. This was just one of my patterns that I just made up. So next thing, once you get this going, hopefully, then let's move this over to the other two strings. Now I try to hit my A string and the corresponding octave, of course the second fret on the G string here. Let's do this again. Back to E and D string. E and D string. A and G string. Okay, that's quite a lot of sound that you got out of your bass already, hopefully. And now let's talk about the angle in which you hit the string with your thumb. Remember, you got this turning of your arm, underarm, and your hand with the wrist, with a stiff wrist going. And most players have their thumb point slightly upwards. There are a few players out there, like for example Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that have their thumb point downwards a bit. The basic idea is to have a single point where you hit the string with your thumb. This is really strictly personal preference. Remember, I gave you this little exercise here with the low E string and the corresponding octave. When you move this exercise over to the A and the G string, you might notice it's a little bit tricky to get your thumb right on the A string, not touching the neighboring strings. When slapping the bass, a lot of players try to view the slapped notes as their bass drum notes. And then the upper notes, octaves in general, like sort of snare drum. Okay, here's a little exercise to get you going with slapping and popping the bass. Try to do octaves. Take your index finger, the first finger, put it on the A string, 3rd fret, and then finger on the G string on the 5th fret, either with your pinky or with your 3rd, the ring finger, the octave of that note. Or like that. Now we can actually move this around like this. Thanks for watching and see you next time.